Hey y'all, welcome back to the MM Sports Pod. Max is back from a great time with his family. Max, how was your Thanksgiving, man?
It was good, man. Had a good Thanksgiving, football game with the cousins, brother, some family. Put up a few touchdowns, got the W. So yeah, it was good. It was a good Thanksgiving.
MVP statistics.
Yeah, something like that.
There you go. Yeah, my family does not do a turkey bowl, so I'm gonna have enough kids to draft the whole team. I'm gonna have to figure that out, but we'll get it going. No problems. Other things that happened this weekend is some college football. That's what we'll be talking about today. So, rivalry weekend. Every time you think college football is going to be normal, there's not enough ranked games or something, we get some crazy stuff. Michigan at Ohio State. Michigan wins that one 13-10. That's 4 in a row now for Michigan in that rivalry game. There was the whole flag planting situation where they got into a big brawl. There was pepper spray used, and it was pretty crazy. What were you seeing in that game?
Yeah, Michigan, they found a formula right now against Ohio State, and it's winning the battle in the trenches. They Michigan going into the season had a super strong defensive line. They've got some really high draft picks. Mason Graham, he's probably going to be a top five defensive tackle here. Kenneth Grant, another maybe first round pick. And then they got talent on defense, and they were just more physical than Ohio State. I think that, both quarterbacks played pretty poorly on both sides. And Will Howard, he's definitely limiting. These big games, he is yet to play well. And so, yeah, Ohio State, I'm still fine with. This is a huge rivalry game, but you can't be losing trench battles to teams that are, finishing the season 7-5, especially if you're going to go win a national championship. So huge win for Michigan, finished the season strong. They won the trench battle. They're tougher than Ohio State, and that's concerning for Ohio State going into the playoffs.
Yeah, Will Howard throws a touchdown. He also throws two picks. Both of his picks were really bad. One of them was just
Hmm.
a misread, the one he threw in the first half when he turned the ball back over to Michigan. And it just terrible read. Corner's right there, sits on it, picks it. The second one he throws, he just misses the receiver, throws it behind him, like 3 yards behind him. It was just a terrible throw. The wide receiver was open. There was a window for him. He just missed him. It was just a terrible throw. And he played well in that Oregon game, but he does have that, slides and terrible clock management to close that game, and then he shows up in this really big game and man, just does not perform. Like I said, 4th in a row for Michigan. I mean, really, what I took away from this game is that Ohio State is going to be in trouble with a team that has a dominant front four. If they can only commit four to the run game and are able to play well doing that and contain Judkins and Henderson, then Ohio State could be in trouble. And I think it's because of that limiting factor you're talking about with Will Howard, because they have no shortage of talent over at the wide receiver position. Emeka Ibuka is really good. Jeremiah Smith, he's up there with the best wide receivers in the country. So I was interested in the game plan by Ohio State in terms of not trying to target that, especially when you don't have Will Johnson on the outside and you continue to try and run the ball over and over. Now that might be a product of Will Howard just not playing well at all, and so you feel like you have to do that. But just ugly from Michigan or from Ohio State. Michigan does end up closing pretty well on the season. They take Indiana to a 5-point game. They smoke Northwestern and then beat Ohio State. So, congrats to Michigan. They put the 5-star defensive tackle from Auburn and signed the number one quarterback, who rumored to be a $10 million NIL deal. Congratulations to him. So great week for Michigan. Do you think Ohio State or not Ohio State? Do you think Ryan Day's job is in any kind of trouble losing his 4th game in a row?
Absolutely, yeah. He's had a 10-win season pretty much every season, so it's kind of crazy to be talking about Ryan Day's job on the line here. But when it comes to Michigan, Ohio State, I think pretty often both sides, Michigan fans, Ohio State fans, they probably care about this game more than any other game. And if you're losing it four straight times, you're on the hot seat. Plus, Ryan Day, not just against Michigan, against other top 5 teams. He just really struggled to get the win. He had his first one, or I don't know about first one, but one of his few against Penn State earlier in the season. But I think with how much talent Ohio State has, you got to be a little disappointed that they haven't really been that they haven't brought a championship home. And yeah, the fact that they're losing 4 straight to their biggest rival, he's definitely on the hot seat.
Yeah, I agree with you. If they lose in the first round of the playoffs at home,
That's
I
right.
bet you that's his job. I think he probably gets fired because they spent the most money of any team. They have, going in, everyone said they have the best roster. You can still make an argument they have the best roster in college football
Yeah,
and
I think
not
they
able to
do.
get it done. And they're not going to get a first round bye, right? Not participating in the Big Ten championship. So they're going to have up to 4 games. They got to go win 4 in a row to win the Natty. I think
Hmm.
we might be in a spot where they got to win 2, maybe 3 of those games for him to keep his job. And that's really, I think that speaks more to the, how big of a rivalry Michigan Ohio State is, and just kind of the expectations for Ohio State going in. They don't have any championships since he's been there. Haven't won one since 2014, and Ohio State Buckeye fans, man, they're getting restless. Uh, let's move on. Let's talk some Miami Syracuse. So Miami gives up 42 points, loses to Syracuse. Cristobal with an interesting decision. He's full of interesting decisions, and by that I mean terrible ones. I'm an Oregon fan. I watch him make very questionable decisions all the time at Oregon. People have had issues with some of the stuff he's done at Miami. And 4 minutes left, your defense has not gotten a stop, and you elect to kick a field goal to be down 4 and give the ball back to Syracuse and give them the opportunity to run the clock out. I get you're confident in Cam Ward to get the ball back and go score if he does get the ball back, but the defense showed you no capacity to get you the ball back. And if you trust Cam Ward that much, which I would, he's probably 3rd or 4th in the Heisman running, and he's been balling all season. Give him the ball, let him go make a play, let him go try and tie that game up. That drops Miami to 10-2. They are now on the outside looking in of the rankings, and the committee said they're not going to jump over Alabama. More on the rankings later, but disastrous game for Miami in their season. What did you see from it?
Yeah, I mean, it's not like this was a massive, shocking upset. This is what we've seen from Miami all season. Every single team that they play, and they put up a gazillion points and they let up a gazillion points. And lately, it's finally caught up to them. Yeah, that coaching decision was terrible. I don't know why you would not trust your quarterback in a gotta have it situation and rely on a defense that's already put up that many points. So that doesn't make any sense. But in a lot of ways, I'm kind of glad to see this. Miami's defense is so bad that I don't see this team really competing with probably 75% of the teams heading to the college football playoff. So Cam Ward was awesome, phenomenal season. It's tough that their season ends like this because I don't really see a path for them to get into the playoffs, which we'll talk about. But yeah, it's a waste. It's a waste of that good of an offense. They're like the Bengals of college football at this point.
Yeah, it really is. You got to see Miami in just for the sake of watching Cam Ward ball on a big stage. That dude is just, he's good, but, you know, defense just isn't good. And that's what Mario Cristobal hangs his hat on, man. Usually at Oregon, that's what he hung his hat on, was his defense. When he came to Miami, obviously he's big on his offensive line and his run game. You got the dynamic quarterback. You got Damian Martinez, who didn't perform as well as he was expected to this season, but still a very, very potent Miami offense. We're not going to get a chance to watch them in a game that really matters. They're going to go play a bowl game, and honestly, I'd be pretty surprised if Cam Ward plays in that game. So, tough way to go. The frustrations with Cristobal never end. Next game, maybe the greatest game I've ever watched. I was sitting on my couch losing my mind over and over. I've got roommates that don't care about football that were just sitting there like, this is the most insane thing I've ever seen. And it truly was. Georgia Tech, they go up 17-0 in that game. They go up 27-13 with 5 minutes left. Georgia scores a touchdown. Georgia Tech gets the ball back, and then they fumble on a 3rd and 2. Haynes King, man, I think 400 yards of offense responsible for, but he fumbles the ball. Personally, I think there was targeting there that was not looked at. He put the crown of his helmet right into his chest. So, you know, call it Georgia bias if you want to. I had a personal issue with it. No one's really talking about it, which kind of bugs me. I thought there'd be more controversy around it. But at the end of the day, Georgia, season on the line, possibly. They would have had a chance to beat Texas, but, you're putting yourself in a do or die against one of the best teams in the country next week if you don't win this game. And they take care of business, pretty much cement themselves into the playoff. What are your reactions from just an instant classic?
Yeah, the game was awesome, man. 8 overtimes, that's ridiculous. I've never personally watched a game that's gone to that many overtimes. And it was just interesting to see, you know, once they get to where they're just doing 2-point conversions, the offensive coordinators were reaching so deep in the bag, throwing like these weird formations, these plays that you don't really typically see. And then, of course, what wins it is just an inside zone run play from Georgia,
Yep.
right up the middle. So it was awesome to see. Which I don't even blame the offensive coordinators. Like you're trying your best. You've played, I don't know, you've probably been on the field for like 5.5 hours at this point. So you're gonna throw everything at winning this game. When it comes to Georgia, it's just pretty much what we've seen all season, really. They play tough for the most part against really, really good teams. Sometimes they handle them. They play down to whatever team that they're playing, like Georgia Tech. That shouldn't be a game for Georgia, right? But it is, and that's been pretty consistent for Georgia the whole season. We just don't know what we're going to get week in and week out with this team. So you definitely have to be a little bit concerned for Georgia, especially if they don't win the SEC championship and have to play 4 games, to win the championship. I don't know, just based off of how inconsistent they are, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough to bet against them and also tough to bet on them. So, but yeah, overall, awesome game. Yeah, instant classic.
Yeah, the volatility of the Georgia team is definitely something to keep an eye on. I mean, they'll show us they're the best team in the country and then show us that they can go play down anybody. I want to take a quick second to just say phenomenal job, Georgia Tech. I mean, you go to Athens and just play lights out, man. That was a phenomenally played game by Georgia Tech. I don't think Georgia even looked necessarily bad as much as Georgia Tech looked really, really good. Now, part of that is obviously Georgia's not playing their A-plus game. They play their best game. They should win that game by 2+ touchdowns. But, I mean, you see the Georgia Tech coach is crying at the end of that game, and I don't blame him, man. I mean, that's probably the most gut-wrenching game that he will ever be a part of, and it's a rivalry game. So, just beautiful to watch. I could rave about it all day. It was awesome. It's why I love college football. It's why the overtime rules are way better in college football than in the NFL. And my last note, I don't want to take away from Georgia Tech at all because
No, definitely not.
there's so many plays they can win that game on. And I personally think that you just go for 2 at the end of the first overtime. You play one play to go win the game. But I'm not here to fault coaching decisions. That's the decision that I would make personally from my couch, right? Obviously, don't have the game feel or anything like that. But I think you give your players one play to go ahead and go win it. Granted, they got 1 2-point conversion in all 8 overtime, so maybe I'm wrong there. Maybe they prove me incorrect, but I like having one play to go win that. Anything else on that game?
No, I don't think so. It was fun. It was a fun game to watch.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely awesome. Another game that came down to the wire, South Carolina at Clemson. 4 touchdowns in this game, all 4 of them quarterback rushing touchdowns. South Carolina scores a touchdown with just over a minute remaining to go up 17-14. Clemson unable to respond. They win that game. Clemson still sneaks into the ACC title game because Miami lost. But, man, South Carolina is a fun team to watch.
That's awesome. Sellers, their quarterback, is hilarious. Like he doesn't really, he's not an effective passer. He goes 13 for 21, 164 yards and a pick. But on the ground, as a quarterback, 166 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns.
My God.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. So it's electric to watch. If you're Clemson, you kind of lucked out, man. You had a big Miami loss there. You're basically gifted another chance at the playoffs. But as far as South Carolina goes, I really think they are on the outside looking in, kind of no matter what they do here. But it's still impressive to see that team go 9-3. That's a hell of a season, and that's a really talented team. So if they're able to keep it together, limit how many people transfer, bring in a couple transfers. This is a team we'll be talking about next season.
Yeah, man, and I hope we are. I think when you go 9-3, especially against the schedule they did, and two of their losses are just absolute nail biters
Hmm.
to LSU and to Alabama. As a coach, you'd think you'd be able to promote, the success of the team in order to keep people around. Maybe bring a couple guys in. Definitely bright future for South Carolina. Like you said, don't see them making the playoffs this year just because of those head-to-head losses to Bama and Ole Miss. But man, they're fun to watch, and Clemson somehow backdoors their way in. Man, I'm tired of this Clemson and Alabama finding a way to
Clemson's
make
all
stuff
right.
happen.
They're their defense, plays pretty tough. Their offense can put up a few. I would kind of label them as mid, to be honest. Yeah, they're a tough out, but they're not crazy. So we'll see if they can beat SMU, but I'm not super impressed with Clemson.
Yeah, and no ranked wins, man. Like I,
It's the
I'm
ACC, man.
unconvinced by
It's all
Clemson.
the ACC teams. I feel like it's this case. It's the same thing every single year.
Yeah, another weak conference, man. Big 12, biggest game of the weekend for the Big 12. Kansas State went to Iowa State. It was a pretty good game. I mean, Iowa State just kind of handled business, stayed right ahead of Kansas State the whole game, mediated all the way through. They forced a turnover at the end to win it. They did actually have a chance to kick a field goal to go up 2 scores. They missed it, so Kansas State did have one more chance with the ball. They go 4-and-out. They're 4 straight incompletions. But that gets Iowa State into the Big 12 championship game. They'll be playing Arizona State. Or do you feel like Iowa State showed any promise in that game, any ability to, maybe beat one of these better teams?
No, I don't think so. I'm not really seeing too much out of the Big 12 other than they're just beating each other. They're trying, to make the playoffs. The committee's fading them. It's been a big battle between Colorado, BYU, Iowa State, and Kansas State. And at the end of the weekend, it shook out to Iowa State and Arizona State. So to be honest, I don't have much analysis other than whoever wins the Big 12 championship is most likely going to, or yeah, probably for sure getting into the playoffs. But I don't view either of them as threats at this point. This is another classic Big 12, a lot of points. Iowa State kind of narrowly wins it.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I got out of that game. Iowa State looks solid. They're a bona fide top 20 team. Like I don't want to take anything
Yeah,
away
for
from them.
sure,
They're
for
they're, they're
sure.
a solid team, and they kind of you would love to see a home game just to see a team go up in Ames, dangerous place to play. But I love home games, dude. Home games are awesome.
Home
But
games are awesome.
but yeah, they won't get well, they might be able to sneak a first round bye depending on what goes on around the league, and we'll
Hmm.
we'll talk about that a little bit later. But the committee did release their rankings, so it gives us some insight into how things might shake out. So this weekend, Texas had to go to Texas A&M. If you guys have been listening, you know I have not been impressed with Texas. They didn't have a ranked win until this game. They lost to Georgia, which is the only ranked game they played. They smoked Texas A&M. The score, 17-7, not indicative of how that game really went. If you watch, Texas dominated that game, start to finish. Texas A&M has the starting drive. They go down, get stopped on 4th and 1 inside the red zone. Texas rips off 17 straight. They're in the red zone looking to go up 24-0, throw a pick six on a tipped ball, and then Texas A&M gets a stop, blocks a punt. They get stopped on 4th and 1 at the goal line again. I think they had 3 chances from the one or something like that, at least two. And Texas turned it over in the red zone twice in that game. One of them was a pick six, a blocked punt. Like the game could have been a lot closer just because of the blocked punt and the stops in the red zone from Texas A&M. It also could have been a blowout. It was clear that Texas was the better team in that one in a crazy atmosphere. What are your takeaways from this one?
Yeah, so last season, Texas, it was offense, offense, offense. That's what got them to the playoffs. And they had some respectable players on defense, but nothing that you weren't scared of Texas defense. Well, this season, I would say, been reversed. The offense is still dynamic, and maybe not quite as good as what it was last season, but the defense has been ridiculous. Like they let up 30 to Georgia, bad, right? Not that's no good. They let up 24 to Vanderbilt. That's not the best. They haven't let up over 20 points in any other game this season. So that defense is really freaking good. And so if you're going to tell me that Texas is, probably like a top 10 defense in the country heading into the college football playoffs with an offense that we know is still super talented, you still have Sarkisian calling plays. This is a dangerous team. And to cap, a really good season off, get your bid to the SEC championship by beating a very solid Texas A&M team. This Texas team is dangerous, and they 100% deserve to be number two. It's interesting seeing, Quinn Ewers is their starter with Archie Manning that just comes in and is their running quarterback. Like,
Yeah.
it's if you grew up watching Peyton Manning and Eli Manning, seeing a Manning take off and juke people out, like dip the shoulder, truck people, and get into the end zone. It's pretty wild. But
Yeah, dive into the pylon.
yeah. So this is a different Manning we're dealing with here. And he definitely, appears to be the future for Texas. But Quinn Ewers has had a hell of a season as well. This has been his best season, I would say, as a quarterback, playing himself into a pretty high draft pick. So, yeah, Texas is impressive.
Yeah, and the thing is if Texas will be in the playoff. Depending on Georgia, if they beat Georgia, they'll get a first round bye. If not, they won't. They'll probably be the 5 seed. Get to host the worst of the champions. That would be a win. They should take care of business. Regardless of who that ends up being. And it's going to be huge, man. I think that can play a huge advantage to them. Texas, man, I'm kind of a Texas believer right now. I feel great about them being at the 2 spot. They did what I asked them to do, which was beat a good team, and they did it handedly in a quality environment. So you got to feel great being Texas going into that one. Big matchup against Georgia. So pretty predictable in terms of the top 4. Oregon 1, Texas 2, Penn State 3, Notre Dame at 4. Interesting the way they rank 5, 6, and 7. So Georgia obviously is going to stay ahead of Tennessee. They're at 5. Ohio State gets slotted in at 6 right behind Georgia. Tennessee 7. And they keep the same kind of cadence of one-loss teams. SMU, Indiana, Boise State. Alabama jumps Miami. Crucial. They basically just gave Alabama that last playoff spot and the committee member said there's not going to be any change in the rankings based on games that teams aren't participating in. So no matter what happens in these games, we're not going to see Miami go back in front of Alabama. They wouldn't have anything really to hang their hat on. They don't have a win over SMU or Clemson that could boost them if those teams were to win. And same thing with Miami being at 12, Ole Miss and South Carolina at 13 and 14. Then we see the ASU at 15 and ISU at 16, representing the Big 12. Clemson drops all the way down to 17. And then other notable teams are going to be UNLV at 20 and Army at 24. That's pretty important just because it shows that there's really no way that Army or Tulane is getting in despite the winner of UNLV or Boise State. That's a de facto play-in game for the playoff.
Yeah. As far as these rankings go, I think I agree with it pretty much the whole thing. If there's a point that people may be angry, it'd be Alabama at 11, especially if you're Ole Miss. I mean, Ole Miss beat Georgia more handedly. They beat Oklahoma, and Oklahoma beat, Alabama pretty handedly. And so just looking at common opponents, if you're Ole Miss, you would probably think, we're definitely we have a better resume than Alabama. I think what kind of holds them back is just kind of the classic committee eyeball test of, oh, we think Alabama is the better of the 2 teams. And so I think that's pretty much one of the only things that goes into that decision. And we knew one of these was gonna, we knew one of these decisions was coming. Unfortunately, there's not too many of them, but of course, it favors Bama. So that's probably the only one that I could see people having too big of an issue with, and then maybe SMU being ranked higher than Indiana, and maybe even Boise State. SMU just, while their record is fantastic, they've had a great season. You're looking at their best win right now being a 1 point win against Duke, arguably. And Duke, had a solid season, but that's not even a ranked team, according to, the committee. And so, maybe you'd want to see Indiana and Boise State be a little bit higher than SMU, but we'll see. We'll see. They're playing in the championship game, so depending on how that goes, maybe they'll end up being right anyways.
Yeah, so in our rankings, they're pretty similar. We got Oregon at 1, Texas 2, Penn State 3, Notre Dame 4, Georgia 5, Ohio State 6, Tennessee 7. We have Indiana at 8 and Boise State at 9, and we slot SMU behind those two teams down to 10. And that's just the product of Boise State now having a ranked win that UNLV has got back up to 20. SMU, like we said, does not have a ranked win. Indiana has just dominated everyone they've played. The Ohio State loss looks a little bit worse now they've lost to Michigan. I think the fact that they beat Michigan when, you kind of look backwards at the trend, it's like, oh, Michigan's maybe a trending up team with some talented players. Maybe that kind of swings you into more favorability with that win that they were able to pull off there. We put ASU all the way up to 11. They're hot. Their two losses are to 8-4 Texas Tech and 5-7 Cincinnati, which kind of rings alarm bells. Didn't have their starting quarterback against Cincinnati, so whatever stock you want to put into that. And they got a chance to compete for a conference championship game. It doesn't really matter if they win, they're going to be in. If they lose, they're going to be out. What is interesting is you start looking at bubble teams, right? And like we said, committee pretty much told Alabama, you're going to be in. They're going to be in over Miami. You're going to be in over Ole Miss. You're going to be in over South Carolina. And the real question is, if Clemson beats SMU, does SMU stay ahead of Alabama or do they fall behind them? And I think they fall behind them. The thing is they have no ranked wins. They did lose to BYU, which is not a bad loss. It's a 2-loss BYU team who's in the top 20. They only lost by 3. But you look and their strength of schedule is 75. That'll go up a little bit with a win or with just playing Clemson. It'll go up. Their strength of record at 9 will go down should they lose. Alabama finishes the season with a strength of schedule of 17 and a strength of record of 10. And they have wins over Georgia. Their key wins, they beat Georgia by 3. They beat LSU by 29, absolutely housed them. Beat South Carolina by 2, which looks better and better every week. And then Mizzou, they smoked, beat them by 34, didn't give up a single point in that one. You look at their losses, man. Tennessee by 7, understandable. You're in Knoxville. That's a very quality team. Oklahoma by 21 is really bad. That's really, really bad. That's a 6-6 Oklahoma team that you got smoked by. Never looked competitive, only put up 3 points. You lose to Vanderbilt by 5, you give up 40 in that one. And, their losses are pretty questionable. So when you're looking at bubble teams, I think the biggest source of frustration probably comes from Ole Miss. I don't love a Miami argument just based on their weak schedule, and they're losing to bad teams. Alabama did too, but Miami hasn't proven they can beat good teams too. So the high ceiling hasn't really been shown there, in my opinion. But you look at Ole Miss, beat Georgia by 18 after Alabama only beat them by 3. They beat South Carolina by 24. Alabama escapes that game, win by 2, and South Carolina had a bunch of opportunities to go do that. They smoked Oklahoma. I mean, they ran them out of the building, and Alabama got smoked by Oklahoma. So, they lost to LSU by 3. Bama smoked them. The big thing for me that I think really takes them out of the playoff is they lost to Kentucky. Kentucky's a 4-win team. Their only SEC win was against Ole Miss. That game was at home. I mean, I know they gave Georgia a run for their money, but Kentucky beat 3 teams that were outside the SEC, none of them even notable. And that's just a really, really ugly loss. I think at the end of the day, it's probably a little bit of brand bias that's carrying it. I kind of like Ole Miss over Alabama just because they beat Georgia and South Carolina by so much more. But I understand the argument. I really do. Their strength of schedule is worse. Their strength of record is worse. So, it kind of is what it is on the bubble there.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, if I had my pick of who I would want to see at number 11, I'd want to see South Carolina more of just being a fan of watching football. They're just a fun team to watch. And I think their resume is very respectable, man. You just beat Clemson. It was a close game, but that's a top, what's Clemson at? They're number 17, and playing for the ACC championship. You beat Mizzou. I don't hold much stock in that, but apparently the committee does. They got Missouri at number 19 right now.
Unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
It doesn't that one doesn't make too much sense, but hey, according to the committee, that's an impressive win. And then Texas A&M, you smack Texas A&M, and so your losses, what prevents them from getting in is they got smoked by Ole Miss, and that's just it is what it is. Given that Ole Miss, is behind Alabama, according to the committee. And South Carolina got smoked by Ole Miss. There's pretty much no way for South Carolina to get in. But I will say, if I had my choice, I'd put South Carolina in for that last spot.
Yeah, that's a team I'd want to see play. I don't think they deserve to be there just based on head-to-head, like you said. You can't put them there.
Yeah,
I'd love to see them there. That's really the end of the deal. You look at the rankings, opens up some questions. So if Clemson wins and Arizona State or Iowa State wins, who gets ranked higher? So Arizona State and Iowa State have one less loss, but they're only ranked one spot ahead of Clemson. I think the committee might have a little bit of a soft spot for Clemson the same way they do for Bama. But Clemson would then pick up a top 10 win against SMU, while Arizona State or Iowa State is a 15 or 16 win. So, do you feel any particular way about which one of those teams should be ranked higher if both Clemson and ASU or Iowa State win?
I would probably lean Clemson just because, okay, these three, Clemson, Iowa State, Arizona State are all right next to each other in the rankings. And Clemson would have, a top 10 win against SMU. And so I think that would warrant jumping Arizona State and Iowa State. I do think style points might come into play here. If Clemson barely beats SMU in kind of a fluky game, but Arizona State just, torches Iowa State or vice versa, then I can maybe see that Big 12 team getting a higher ranking. But yeah, I think if both games are reasonable, Clemson gets the win. I think Clemson jumps the Big 12 champ.
Yeah, and I think that's really important depending on that Boise State UNLV game. If Boise State wins, I think they're going to get. It's going to depend on SMU, right? So there's still a bunch of different seeding things that are at play here. But if that scenario happens where Clemson does win that game, Boise State gets that 3 spot. So congrats to Boise State if that does happen. That's phenomenal for them. But you're looking at it, it's like, okay, well now if Boise State wins and both those teams win, well one of them's getting a first round bye and one of them gets to go to Athens or gets to go to Texas or gets to go to Ohio State, however they end up ranking it.
Yeah, you don't want to do that.
Man, congratulations. Good luck. So that seeding difference could be absolutely massive. Now, granted, whoever gets the 4 seed would play the winner of that game, but not on the road. Not on the road. That'd be neutral site. So got a little bit of a better opportunity there. So this weekend, Texas had to go to Texas A&M. If you guys have been listening, you know I have not been impressed with Texas. They didn't have a ranked win until this game. They lost to Georgia, which is the only ranked game they played. They smoked Texas A&M. The score, 17-7, not indicative of how that game really went. If you watch, Texas dominated that game start to finish. Texas A&M has the starting drive. They go down, get stopped on 4th and 1 inside the red zone. Texas rips off 17 straight. They're in the red zone looking to go up 24-0, throw a pick six on a tipped ball. And then Texas A&M gets a stop, blocks a punt. They get stopped on 4th and 1 at the goal line again. I think they had 3 chances from the 1 or something like that, at least 2. And Texas turned it over in the red zone twice in that game. One of them was a pick six, a block punt. Like, the game could have been a lot closer just because of the blocked punt and the stops in the red zone from Texas A&M. It also could have been a blowout. It was clear that Texas was the better team in that one in a crazy, crazy atmosphere. What are your takeaways from this one?
Yeah, so last season, Texas, it was offense, offense, offense. That's what got them to the playoffs. And they had some respectable plays on defense, but nothing that you were, you weren't scared of Texas defense. Well, this season it's, I would say, been reversed. The offense is still dynamic, and maybe not quite as good as what it was last season, but the defense has been ridiculous. Like they let up 30 to Georgia, bad, right? Not that's no good. They let up 24 to Vanderbilt. That's not the best. They haven't let up over 20 points in any other game this season. So that defense is really freaking good. And so if you're going to tell me that Texas is, probably like a top 10 defense in the country heading into the college football playoffs with an offense that we know is still super talented, you still have Sarkisian calling plays. This is a dangerous team. And to cap, a really good season off, get your bid to the SEC championship by beating a very solid Texas A&M team. This Texas team is dangerous, and they 100% deserve to be number two. It's interesting seeing, Quinn Ewers is their starter with Archie Manning that just comes in and is their running quarterback. Like
Yeah.
it's if you grew up watching Peyton Manning and Eli Manning, seeing a Manning take off and juke people out, like dip the shoulder, truck people, and get into the end zone. It's pretty wild. But
Yeah, dive into the pylon.
yeah, so this is a different Manning we're dealing with here. And he definitely, appears to be the future for Texas. But Quinn Ewers has had a hell of a season as well. This has been his best season, I would say, as a quarterback, playing himself into a pretty high draft pick. So, yeah, Texas is impressive.
Yeah, and the thing is if Texas will be in the playoff. We depending on Georgia, if they beat Georgia, they'll get a first round bye. If not, they won't. They'll probably be the 5 seed. Get to host the worst of the champions. That would be a win. They can take care of business. Regardless of who that ends up being. And it's going to be huge, man. It's going to be. I think that can play a huge advantage to them. Texas, man, I'm kind of a Texas believer right now. I feel great about them being at the 2 spot. They did what I asked them to do, which was beat a good team, and they did it handedly in a quality environment. So you got to feel great being Texas going into that one big matchup against Georgia.
Last season,
So getting into conference championship weekend, always fun, always a bunch of, sometimes they're blowouts, but they're high stake games, which is always fun. We get to see a bunch of them in a single weekend. Super exciting stuff. Usually, it's like 2 or 3 of these games matter in the playoff. Now we've got 6 that all have massive playoff implications. We've got maybe 12 teams here playing, probably 10, but maybe 12 teams playing for a playoff spot. First one is UNLV. They're going to be playing Boise State. Boise State's a 4-point favorite. What are you looking to see out of this one?
yeah. I mean, Boise State, they got a lot on the line here. If they win this game, there's a good chance that they're the 3 seed heading into the playoffs, which is pretty crazy. For a Mountain West team to, get a top 3 seed in the first, 12 team playoff. So that'd be pretty cool to see. Genty, he's still making his bid for, being the Heisman or winning the Heisman. But I like Boise to win this one. I like them to cover the 4-point spread. I like UNLV. They've been a damn good team all season. But we've seen this game before. Boise, it was close, but Boise got the win, and I kind of see something similar. I see a close game. I think I'd take the under on the 58.5. I think we got a few less points than that with a close win. I kind of see like a 27-24 win for Boise here.
Yeah, last game was 30-24. I picked Boise State -6.5 on an alt spread, and they won by 6, so that was awesome. But yeah, they played the game before. They won. UNLV, phenomenal season, and they still got every opportunity in the world to go win this game. I mean, it's not like they're out of the question.
No,
Boise
definitely
State before last week against Oregon State has shown some weakness, like playing a 17-13 game against Wyoming. Like that's ugly. So they've shown that they're not always at the peak of their powers. At the end of the day, Ashton Genty is that guy. He's got a chance to be the Heisman winner. I don't think it'll happen, but he's got a chance to be the Heisman winner. He's been dynamic all season. I also like the under. I think Boise State wins this one 24-21. That is a UNLV cover. I don't feel super confident. I don't love touching the spread in this game. I expect it to be close. I do like the under in this one. Tulane versus Army, probably not going to matter. Still worth talking about if the committee decides that they're going to, you know, change up based on something. Like, I don't see it, but we've seen weirder stuff, like an undefeated team for some reason just dropping 3 spots based on their loss being ugly and getting kicked out of the playoff last year in Florida State. So worth discussing for sure, especially considering both these teams' successful seasons. Tulane lost to Memphis by 10 last week, and that probably ruined their playoff chances and Army's chance of getting a ranked win here. Tulane is the 6-point favorite. Man, like, Army, are they going to be able to run the ball and control it and control the game? Because it's really, to me, who dictates this game. If Army dictates the game, which sounds oversimplified, but with Army style of play, it really is every single game. Can they dictate it? Do they get to control the ball, possess the ball for a very long time? Do they get to rest their defense and then have them fresh, ready to go to play great? And Tulane has shown a higher ceiling, in my opinion. I expect Tulane to win this game. I like the under on 46.5. I don't love it. Tulane's offense can be pretty dynamic, but I've got Tulane winning this one 23-20. What are you seeing out of this?
Yeah, I see it pretty similar. I don't have like any expert analysis on Tulane and Army. I'm not too tapped in, but Army's been, they run the triple option. They play keep away essentially. They pound the rock. They try to play their best defense and they try to shorten the game. And so, yeah, if they can do that, they'll absolutely beat Tulane. I kind of like Army in this one. I like them to for sure cover the 6-point spread. I do think it's close. I like the under 46.5. But yeah, give me Army here.
Yeah. Next game, Big 12 championship, Iowa State versus Arizona State. Like we said, de facto playoff game, similar to that UNLV Boise State game and probably Clemson, SMU. Arizona State's a 2-point favorite here. Neither team, like we talked about, we don't think is going to make a run. I think Arizona State has a better chance to make a run just because they've been hot. They absolutely dominated Arizona on the road. Being a student here, that was pretty ugly to watch. I was at that game. Didn't even make it to halftime, and I consider myself a pretty loyal fan. So, oof. But Arizona State, like I said, they're hot. One loss to Texas Tech. Their other loss to Cincinnati without their starting quarterback. They've been playing really well. Iowa State, they're always, I feel like they're always like a top, that 15 to 25 range. But this game has a chance to be just a fun watch. Who do you think wins this one?
Kind of like Iowa State here. Iowa State, their quarterback can zip it anywhere. But man, he tries to throw it into every window, which leads to some high volatility in his play. So I think that it leans towards Iowa State this game, though. I think he throws a few more touchdowns than picks. Always give me the Big 12 over. Give me the over on 50.5. Yeah, I think Arizona State's had a phenomenal season. The turnaround's been crazy, but I think it ends here. Give me Iowa State.
Yeah, I'm gonna ride with ASU, just playing the hot hand. They've looked really, really good recently. This game was the hardest game for me to pick out of any of these games. I think, you're looking at a true 50-50 toss-up. I expect to see a great game. I picked ASU to win 28-23. But, man, either way, phenomenal season for both teams.
Mm-hmm.
Man, it's a freaking playoff game. It's awesome. I love the new format. Georgia versus Texas. Oh, baby. Rematch. Georgia went to Texas, won 30-15 last time. Vegas still likes Texas here by 2.5. Man, Georgia volatility. Are they playing up and going and beating Texas, or are they having a bad week and taking a loss?
I feel like every time we want to fade Georgia, Georgia goes and wins. It happened with Tennessee. It happened with Texas. I can't really remember the Texas one at that point, but there's been fading of Georgia in these big games, and Georgia comes out and kind of dominate. So I think given that Texas is the 2.5-point favorite, give me Georgia. my analysis would lean towards Texas. I think they're the better overall team. I think their defense has been way more consistent. I think their offense is more dangerous. I think Quinn Ewers has played better this season than Carson Beck. I think their skill position play, like the receiver, Isaiah Bond, he's better than any receiver on Georgia right now. The running back, like everything about Texas says to me that Texas should win this game. But every time I think that, Georgia goes and dominates. So just to play it safe, kind of hedge my bet here, I'm say that Texas is better, but Georgia's gonna win.
Yeah, and I mean, I feel like that's kind of what we saw last time. I actually expect Texas to win this game. I've got them 27-24. I'm basing this off Quinn Ewers got benched in the last game. It was probably his worst game of the season. I don't expect that to happen again. I expect him to be ready. Sark's got a whole game of film now. Granted, so is Kirby Smart. Both those coaches are top 5 coaches in college football right now for sure. I think it's going to be a fantastic game. They're playing for a first round bye, so it's not like there's nothing on the line here. This is a massive, massive game. You know, Georgia loses this game, they might not get a home game in that first round. I'd be curious how the committee would seed that 10-3 Georgia team. But look, I think Quinn Ewers is just going to play better, and I think that's really what it comes down to. I don't expect him to play like he did last time. Give me Texas for all the reasons that you talked about, and certainly wouldn't be shocked if Georgia comes and wins this game because they just show the ability to play up and down to any level of competition. Big Ten championship game. This one, for some reason, it's a massive game, but I feel pretty strongly about Oregon here. They're a 3.5-point favorite. Oregon has looked better. Penn State, they lost to Ohio State in their only big game, and that's a trend we've seen from James Franklin. He's 3-17 against top 10 teams in his career, which is a really, really tough mark. And Penn State, their last really big win, if you're not counting Rose Bowls and stuff like that, last really big win is when they were at home in 2019 and beat a number 16 Michigan team. Last time they beat a top 5 team was a win over Ohio State in 2016 on a walk-off field goal when they were unranked. I don't expect them to flip that trend. I like Oregon. Actually, I'm going to pick them 30-20 in this one. How are you feeling about it?
Yeah, I think Oregon is absolutely the better team. That defense has been playing fantastic this season. Their offense, they can kind of hit you in a bunch of different ways. Penn State, like you said, they just don't win the big games. I will say it's still a talented team, and so I think Penn State might jump out to the lead first, kind of punch Oregon in the mouth to begin with. But I think Oregon, as they've done a few times this season, weathers the storm, ends up winning by probably 7 to 10, somewhere around that range. So I do think it'll be close and it'll be interesting to start, but I think Oregon ends up eventually handling business and stays the number 1 team.
Yeah, limiting factor for me here for Penn State is their offense. I mean, it's what it has been in these big games. Their offense, when they play really, really good defense, has not shown the ability to be dynamic enough. They'll go hang 45 on Bowling Green, then they go play a good team, and it's tough for them to get over that 20 mark. And at some point, your defense is on the field so long against these really, really good offenses, they're going to score. You can't ask them to hold Oregon to 14 points so they can win this game the same way you can't ask them to hold Ohio State to 10 so they can win that game 13-10, including a defensive touchdown. So I just think Oregon's defensive front is going to be able to control the run game, similar to the way Michigan was able to against Ohio State, force Penn State into passing down. I just think Oregon's the better team in pretty much every facet of the game. That's why I feel confident about Oregon minus 3.5. Clemson versus SMU, ACC title game. SMU is the 2.5-point favorite here. I think whoever wins this game is probably getting bounced in the first round, but you never know. You never know. I originally looked and said, I'm going to pick SMU here, and then I keep looking back. And Clemson played a pretty solid game against South Carolina. Specifically, their defense looked really good. SMU doesn't have a ranked win. And maybe I'm showing some committee brand bias after ranting about it for so long. Maybe I got a little bit of it too. But I actually think Clemson is going to end up taking this one and punch themselves a ticket to the playoff. Are you seeing this differently than me?
No, I think Clemson wins barely. SMU's a solid team. just not tested. Clemson has been tested. I think they'll be able to use that and be able to handle a tough game, better. And so, yeah, I like Clemson. Do I really care who wins? It's the ACC. Not really. I don't think either of these teams have much of a shot come playoff time. But hey, it's basically a playoff game.
Yeah, man, great weekend of college football. Not necessarily in terms like there are some who's going to be in, but there's not going to be any games where it's like they win, so does someone else sneak into the top 12? Like
Mm,
we kind of know who it's going to be. It's going to be the winners of those championship games, Alabama, and then the 8 teams that are up there in the rankings. So still great to see. We'll see, a bunch of exchanges and possibly first round buys. Georgia, Penn State, they've got a shot at earning one of those first round buys, making seeding pretty interesting. But it'll be great games. It'll tell us a lot about a lot of teams and some de facto playoff games. So, absolutely nothing to complain about. Should be a phenomenal week. Is there anything else you want to talk about in terms of college football?
I don't think so, man. I'm just excited to get to these championship games. I'm excited to see what the final ranking is, and then we can finally start breaking down our first 12-team playoff. So this has been one of the most interesting seasons of college football, just given the fact that you know we got 3 lost teams that might make the playoffs. Your season isn't dead off of 1 loss. So this has been a fantastic change for college football. I think it's going to generate a lot more interest, and yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, it's cool, man. You got teams that wouldn't have a dream of making a 14 playoff that are going to be able to get in and that have a chance. And when you have 4 to 8 games, depending on how the first rounds go, of teams that are you wouldn't pick, like maybe an SMU to go beat a Georgia, but you play that game 4 times. SMU's a talented team. Like maybe they go win that 1 out of 4 times, and maybe we get to see that. So Cinderella runs, they're moving maybe from basketball over to football, and it'd be really cool to see. Like you said, it's great for college football. I've always loved college football, and seeing this change, it's super fun, man. We get to talk about a bunch of different teams moving forward. So just overall loving it as a fan. We appreciate you guys listening. Glad to have Max back this week. Always good to have my guy on here breaking it down with us. Didn't have to do a lonesome college football pod this weekend. But yeah, Oregon -3.5. Absolutely hammer it. Mark my words on that one. And go make some money this weekend.